Welcome back to the watch list. If you've already seen my video on the extensive look of Phase 1, then I'm doing the exact same thing here. To those not in the know,
Wait a minute! Who are you?
then I'm basically just gathering the reviews I've made on all the Marvel Phase 2 movies and bunching them together in this video. It's not just that though, I've got a conclusion / my opinion of what I think about Phase 2 at the end. Obviously, you can use the chapters in the video to jump where you like, when you like. Phase 2 was a pretty substantial part of the MCU. It brought us closer to the characters we knew from Phase 1, and also adds some new elements to the mix. The overarching theme of Phase 2 is a tricky one. Phase 1's theme is what it takes to be a hero, or some could say with great power comes great responsibility. It's also about the assembling of a team, whereas Phase 2 is a convoluted mess of themes from one movie to another. I'll get into this at the end of the video though, so stay tuned. What did you think of Phase 2? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Nevertheless, let's get into it.
After the Avengers became a box office triumph, Iron Man 3 had big shoes to fill. The movie grossed over $1.2 billion worldwide, proving that audiences were still heavily invested in Tony Stark's solo adventures. This film was a bit lacking for me. I feel like they could have done more with the villains instead of whatever this is. But there are good portions of this movie, such as the mansion scene. It's a brilliant Tony Stark movie, just not a good Iron Man movie. As you could probably tell, I've got a cold during the recording of this, making my voice deeper than it usually is. But I'm excited to delve into Phase 2 of the Marvel Universe. So let's go.
Yes, it's the culmination from Iron Man 1 and 2, but it's also a follow-up to the Avengers, and in a way that liberates it to be more unique than anything that has come before.
This film takes a bold new path, straying away from the story arcs similar to its predecessors. They do this by stripping Tony Stark of his tech and forcing him to rely on his ingenuity. Shane Black, known for his work on films like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which also stars Robert Downey Jr., and most recently the 2018's The Predator, which is not great, brings his signature style of action comedy while diving deeper into the emotions of the main characters. The film's narrative approach is interesting, as there's a few big twists, mainly involving Ben Kingsley's The Mandarin, which was and still is a very divisive moment in the MCU. Don't get me wrong, I like Ben Kingsley's role as Trevor Slattery, the British actor.
Don't hurt the face, I'm an actor.
Who doesn't even realise that his role is incredibly dangerous and bordering, probably already crossing the line of terrorism. He's just hilariously ignorant. It's a very arbitrary plot, but it has its moments. Act 1 introduces Tony's PTSD and anxiety attacks. While establishing the threat of the Mandarin, we see a vulnerable Tony Stark struggling with his experiences from the Battle of New York. Act 2 forces Tony to go back to basics after his mansion is destroyed and his suits are lost. It's basically bringing Tony back to the cave that Iron Man was born in. Act 3 culminates in a compelling finale featuring dozens of Iron Man suits, which I guess he could have just called earlier, Pepper's enhanced abilities, and the revelation of the true villain behind everything. The action sequences in Iron Man 3 are actually quite innovative, ranging from Tony fighting without his suit to controlling multiple suits remotely. The destruction of Tony's Malibu house was a momentous sequence, and one that I didn't even see coming when I first watched it, making this scene even more intense. The movie really shines with its use of practical effects. The mansion attack had some awesome real sets that they could actually blow up, with CGI added in to make it look even cooler. The Air Force One rescue was also pretty wild. They did a lot of real stunt work and then enhanced it with effects to create this crazy mid-air sequence. Using real effects whenever they could really made these big action scenes feel more grounded and intense. There's a bit of trivia I touch on later about this scene that is, well, record-breaking. Robert Downey Jr. delivers perhaps his most nuanced performance as Tony Stark, showing vulnerability and anxiety alongside his usual wit. There's a way in his acting where you can tell he's stressed, but he keeps it in, and that expresses his character and the way he is really well. Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts gets significantly more action scenes, and finally suits up in the Malibu house attack sequence, while Don Cheadle returns as James Rhodes or Iron Patriot, with an expanded yet familiar role. Ben Kingsley's portrayal of the Mandarin provides one of the film's most controversial yet memorable elements. Sorry, you might be able to hear my dog in the background squeaking her toy. While Guy Pearce brings complexity to Aldrich Killian as the true antagonist. However, Maya Hansen, played by Rebecca Hall, was originally intended to be the main villain in the script, as she is in the comic, but this was changed due to concerns about toy sales. This decision led to Aldrich Killian becoming the main villain of the movie. And of course, we can't forget Jon Favreau returning as Happy Hogan, and as he isn't directing this time around, his role is a bit more integral within the film.
Badge, guys.
One character I almost forgot to mention in this movie is Harley. His role in this film was essential, as it gave Tony something to bounce off of when it came to his mental health and his own parental issues. Ty Simpkins is a great actor. He just nails it in this. His kid roles throughout say 2010 to 2015, from Insidious to Jurassic World, were golden. Iron Man 3 directly addresses the aftermath of the Avengers, particularly how the New York battle and his trip to space, almost sacrificing himself, affected Tony psychologically. The film also sets up future developments in the MCU, including Tony's evolving relationship with his suits, and his growing concern about protecting Earth, cleverly folding into Age of Ultron. One scene that would have been really fun and would have connected to future projects was actually deleted due to RDJ being hesitant to carry on with the character of Tony Stark after this movie. The scene involved Tony Stark flying off into space to meet with the Guardians of the Galaxy, similar to some story arcs in the comics. I would have loved to see how this would have affected the Guardians movie. And of course, we get a tie into the Hulk as we see Bruce Banner in the post-credits, revealing that he is the person Tony has been narrating to for the entire film. So let's crack on with these tidbits about the film. Like I said earlier, I'd come back to the trivia about the Air Force One scene. The fact is that the film actually holds a Guinness World Record for the largest ever freefall stunt sequence, performed at 8,000 feet. That's wild. A brief scene featuring Yinsen from the first Iron Man is in a flashback at the beginning of the movie. This one's really cool. Anthony Mackie auditioned to play the Mandarin and ended up being cast as Sam Wilson / the Falcon in Captain America the Winter Soldier. A real news helicopter crashed during the filming in North Carolina. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured. Iron Man 3 deserves a solid B rating. While it takes bold risks with its character development and plot twists, some of these choices proved divisive among fans. However, its exploration of Tony Stark's character and innovative action sequences make it a significant entry in the MCU. Iron Man 3 successfully concludes the Iron Man trilogy by taking Tony Stark's character in a new direction. While some of its creative choices were controversial, the film's exploration of identity and trauma, combined with spectacular action sequences, creates an engaging superhero story. The movie proves that the MCU could take risks with established characters. It serves as both a satisfying conclusion to the Iron Man series and a stepping stone for Tony Stark's continued evolution in the MCU. As the second film in Phase 2, Thor: The Dark World had the challenge of expanding the cosmic side of the MCU, while delivering a compelling solo adventure. Despite mixed reviews, the film grossed over $644 million worldwide. This film gets a lot of flack for being one of the weaker MCU entries, and while I do agree, it also has some great moments, especially when it comes to Thor and Loki's dynamic. So let's dive into it.
I'm imagining that forever Thor's story will be split between Asgard and the Nine Realms and also Earth. Part of the challenge is to balance his godliness and the kind of humanity that we feel in him, so the story will always revolve tightly around Midgard.
This film takes Thor in a new direction, moving further into the cosmic and mythological elements of his world. Directed by Alan Taylor, best known for his episodes of Game of Thrones, the movie leads into the elegance of Asgard, but struggles with its villains and pacing. The narrative of Thor: The Dark World is a bit all over the place. Act 1 sets up the Aether as an ancient force of destruction, and later revealed to be an Infinity Stone. However, we don't see its full potential in this movie, which is a shame. We're reacquainted with Jane Foster, who inadvertently becomes its host, which in turn awakens Malekith as he begins his plans for vengeance. Act 2 focuses on Thor seeking Loki's help to stop Malekith after Asgard suffers a brutal attack, and the death of their mother. Their escape from Asgard is one of the film's best sequences. Act 3 leads to a final battle in London where Thor and Malekith fight across different realms in a quite chaotic and underwhelming showdown. While the setup is intriguing, the film struggles with pacing, especially in its midsection. The comedic relief, particularly from Darcy and Eric Selvig, can feel forced at times, undercutting the stakes, which can be a big downfall of Marvel movies in general. But it's very prominent here. The film's action sequences are quite impressive, and its visual style is unique within the MCU. This is mostly due to the saturation, as it proves very dull and boring. The attack on Asgard is one of the most striking scenes, which showcases some of the best set designs and cinematography in the movie. Asgard itself is more fleshed out and it feels lived in. The final battle in London is a fun concept with the realm hopping mechanics, although it feels less impactful compared to the other MCU climaxes. The Dark Elf design is cool, but it does lack personality, making Malekith feel like a generic villain. However, the film does excel in expanding a grandeur of Asgard, with its mix of sci-fi and fantasy aesthetics. Thor's costume is a lot more bold and expressive. They do keep this design for Age of Ultron. One other visual aspect of Thor that people like to mention is his hair. In the first film, I won't lie, his hair didn't look great, and the whole issue with his eyebrows. This time, Chris Hemsworth grew his own hair out, and I think they still use extensions, but it looks much better than it did. As we're talking about him, Chris Hemsworth continues to shine as Thor, balancing his regal presence with a more grounded side. However, Chris himself came out and said that he was disappointed with his portrayal in Thor 2, and that he didn't feel like he grew the character in any way, which is very true. But then throughout Ragnarok, Infinity War and Endgame, Thor's character is easily one of the most developed. Tom Hiddleston as Loki steals every scene he's in. His complex relationship with Thor remains the emotional core of the movie, and his death scene is one of the film's best moments. Natalie Portman as Jane Foster has more to do than in the first four, but she still feels underutilized. One thing they didn't touch on in the Avengers is how Thor managed to get to Earth after the Rainbow Bridge was destroyed. This also raises the question throughout the movie of why Thor never came back to Jane. In the film, they explain this away by saying he was fighting in Asgardian wars, which, sorry Thor, I just don't buy it. Christopher Eccleston as Malekith is, unfortunately, one of the MCU's weakest villains. Despite having a cool backstory, he lacks depth, and most of his dialogue is forgettable.
I am Malekith, and I would have what is mine.
Kat Dennings as Darcy and Stellan Skarsgård as Eric Selvig bring the comedy, though like I said before, some of it feels excessive. This film introduces the Aether, later revealed to be the Reality Stone, tying directly into Avengers Infinity War. The film also sets up Loki's rule over Asgard, which plays a big role in Thor Ragnarok. The death of Frigga, Thor's mum, makes for a special heartwarming sequence in Avengers Endgame. The post-credits scene featuring the Collector teases Guardians of the Galaxy and the Infinity Stones, subtly building up Thanos' eventual arrival. The film does expand the cosmic lore of the MCU, bringing in dark elves and some of Odin's backstory. Now for some trivia about the film. The movie originally had a darker tone, as at the time they were following the footsteps of Game of Thrones, but Marvel Studios pushed for more humour and reshoots to add comedic elements. Tom Hiddleston was so popular that they added more Loki scenes after audiences responded positively to him. Chris Hemsworth's real-life wife, Elsa Pataky, stood in for Natalie Portman in the final kiss scene, due to scheduling conflicts. There was originally a plan to show more of Odin's backstory and Malekith's deeper motivations, but these were cut from the final film, which could explain why Malekith feels so underdeveloped. I'd give Thor: The Dark World a C. While it has great action, stunning visuals, and strong moments between Thor and Loki, its weak villain, uneven pacing, and reliance on forced humour hold it back from being one of the better MCU films. What do you think? Does Thor: The Dark World deserve its reputation, or is it an underrated gem? Let me know in the comments. Thor: The Dark World may not be a top tier MCU film, but it's not without its merits. It expands the cosmic side of the universe, gives us some fantastic Thor and Loki moments, and features impressive visuals. However, its uneven tone between dark fantasy and comedy along with underwhelming character development for both Thor and Jane, hold it back from being truly memorable. While it might not be the strongest entry in the MCU, it plays a role in setting up future stories, especially Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War.
Following the events of the Avengers, the Winter Soldier had the task of grounding the MCU. They did this by setting the movie as a political thriller. Obviously, Marvel still had some trouble at keeping the superhero appeal, although the film succeeded at this spectacularly, as it grossed over $714 million worldwide and gained widespread critical acclaim. Seen as one of the MCU's strongest entries, the film revolutionized the franchise's storytelling and made superhero movies that could tackle complex political themes a reality.
What we wanted to deliver, and the Russo brothers have done a tremendous job in delivering this, is a movie unlike any other Marvel movie. It is tonally very, very different. It's got the humor, it's got the action, but at the same time, we see characters exploring their situations in a much deeper, richer way than we've done in the other films.
As the first film in the MCU directed by the Russo brothers, it takes a sharp turn from the first Captain America, progressing from a World War II period piece into a conspiracy thriller that would end up being one of the most consequential movies within the MCU. The Winter Soldier follows an engaging story that caters not only to Marvel fans, but to a casual audience too. Within Act 1, Steve Rogers struggles to adapt to a modern society while working for S.H.I.E.L.D. The discovery of suspicious activities within the organization sets up the main conflict. Act 2 ramps up the tension as Steve goes on the run with Black Widow, uncovering layers of conspiracy while dealing with the emotional impact of the Winter Soldier's true identity. Act 3 ends with the explosive fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the conclusive confrontation between Steve and Bucky. The pacing is exceptional, balancing character moments, plot revelations, and action sequences without ever feeling rushed or dragged out. I remember my first time watching this and not wanting to pause it because of how hooked I was, and since then I've had a soft spot for political thrillers. The action in The Winter Soldier is hands down some of the best in the MCU. The fight scenes just feel raw and intense. The movie even kicks off with a suspenseful stealth mission on board a cargo ship, which becomes the catalyst event that uncovers the hidden agenda behind S.H.I.E.L.D. The highway fight with the Winter Soldier is an absolute standout. It's tense, fast-paced, and shows just how dangerous Bucky is. The elevator fight is just pure tactical brilliance from Cap, and it's impossible not to get hyped watching it. Then there's the helicarrier battle, which manages to balance epic scale with emotional stakes. Visually, the movie takes cues from classic 1970s political thrillers, with a darker, more serious tone that makes it stand out from earlier MCU films. The mix of practical effects and stunts adds an extra layer of realism that really holds up, even years later. Chris Evans absolutely nails it as Steve Rogers in this one. He brings out Cap's moral compass and inner struggles effortlessly, while also showing how tough it can be for Steve to fit into the modern world. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow gets some solid screen time too. Her partnership with Cap feels natural and shows off how badass and resourceful she is. Sebastian Stan really steps up as the Winter Soldier. He's scary, he's tragic, and you can feel the weight of his connection to Steve in every scene they're in. Robert Redford as Alexander Pierce brings his old-school authority that makes the political thriller vibe of the movie even better. And of course, Anthony Mackie makes his debut as Sam Wilson / the Falcon. He and Chris Evans have instant chemistry, and it's awesome seeing Falcon step in as Cap's wingman, literally. The film's impact on the MCU was immense. The fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. created a shockwave that would resonate throughout the future movies and TV shows. The Winter Soldier's reveal as Bucky Barnes sets up crucial plot points for Civil War and beyond. The introduction of Sam Wilson becomes increasingly important as the MCU progresses, especially considering his future role in the franchise. The film also establishes the Russo brothers as key architects of the MCU's future, leading to their involvement in Civil War and the Infinity Saga's conclusion. It's also recently been announced that they're returning to direct Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, which is kind of what Marvel needs right now. The Winter Soldier used over 2,500 visual effects shots, with 900 of them dedicated to creating the helicarriers and their destruction sequence. Chris Evans performed many of his own stunts, training extensively in parkour and military combat techniques. The elevator fight scene took 3 days to film and involved extensive rehearsal to choreograph properly. The Russo brothers studied films like 3 Days of the Condor and The Parallax View for inspiration. The Winter Soldier's mask went through over 50 different design iterations before the final version was chosen. I'd give Captain America the Winter Soldier an A. It caught me off guard when I first watched this. I was expecting something more comic styled, similar to Avengers 2012. But the tone was much darker and realistic, which is what this movie needed. And it's what the character of Captain America thrives in. It had me on the edge of my seat throughout, and each of the character moments were just as gripping as the next. So what's your take? Does the Winter Soldier deserve all the hype it gets as one of Marvel's greatest hits? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The Winter Soldier truly changed the game for superhero movies. It showed everyone that you could mix these intense political thriller themes with superhero action, whilst tackling heavy topics like government spying and corruption. The way they handled Cap's character was especially noteworthy. Chris Evans brought so much depth to Steve Rogers in this one, as he solidifies himself within the time period. The movie made us think about who we should trust and what freedom actually cost in today's world, which again is pretty bold for a superhero film. This more serious approach left a lasting mark on Marvel movies. You can see its influence in films like Civil War and Black Panther, which weren't afraid to mix big action with serious themes. The Winter Soldier proved that Marvel could take risks and still succeed, and it's still the go-to example of how to make a smart superhero movie. Marvel took their biggest risk yet with Guardians of the Galaxy, adapting one of their most obscure comic book properties into a space comedy. The gamble paid off though, with the film grossing over $773 million worldwide, just surpassing The Winter Soldier, while establishing itself as one of Marvel's most beloved franchises. The film proved that Marvel could successfully launch any property, no matter how unknown, with the right combination of humor, art, and amazing visuals. This franchise really solidifies itself as my favorite trilogy of the MCU. Which is funny because I remember being really skeptical about this film when I first watched it about 10 years ago now. Wow, that makes me feel old. There's just so much heart to it. James Gunn does a fantastic job, as do the cast. I'll dive a bit deeper into the trilogy as a whole when I get to Volume 3.
I do think of dealing with Guardians of the Galaxy as being on untrammeled snow. And the first thing that excited me about Guardians, before any story elements or anything else, was actually creating the visual look.
James Gunn really knocked it out of the park with this one. He took what could have been Marvel's biggest flop and turned it into something amazing, bringing in emotional depth with fantastic comedic timing, in a way that redefined the tone of future MCU films. Like any good team movie, Guardians takes a bunch of random misfits and throws them together. But what makes it special is how it doesn't take itself too seriously whilst it's doing it. Act 1 introduces us to Peter Quill and gradually brings together our unlikely team of heroes through a series of prison breaks and chase sequences. Act 2 develops a relationship between these misfits, while revealing the true nature of the orb and raising the stakes of their mission. Act 3 culminates in an epic battle on Xandar, showing just how far this ragtag group have come as a team. This movie really hits the nail on the head when it comes between balancing action scenes, funny moments, and heartfelt stuff. It never gets too heavy on any one thing, and it just flows naturally. The action sequences here really dial things up to 11. From intense spaceship dogfights to those intimate character showdowns that let each Guardian shine in their own unique way.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go back to the prison break sequence. It's absolute perfection in how it introduces our team's abilities and personalities. Then there's the massive Xandar battle that just keeps escalating, culminating in that iconic final face-off with Ronan.
Ooh, child, things will get brighter.
The visuals in this movie are breathtaking. Every alien world pops with vibrant colours and incredible attention to detail, making the cosmic MCU feel grounded despite its wild concepts. Chris Pratt brings charm and vulnerability to Peter Quill, Star-Lord, perfectly capturing both his bravado and hidden pain. Zoe Saldana delivers a powerful performance as Gamora, bringing depth to a character torn between her evil father and her willingness to do what's right. Dave Bautista surprises as Drax, delivering both intense action and deadpan humor with perfect timing, quickly becoming one of Marvel's funniest characters. Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel deserve a special mention for bringing Rocket and Groot to life through voice work alone, creating two of the most memorable CGI characters in recent cinema. Although I can't agree on Vin Diesel's pay for this. I mean, he gets 3 words throughout the movie and gets paid millions. But that's just me. While more standalone than many MCU films, Guardians established several important elements. The first being the introduction of the Power Stone. This became a key plot device not just in Guardians but throughout the Infinity Saga. Not only do we see it in the movie, but we get to see it in action, showing the real damage of these artifacts. We also get a more detailed expansion of Marvel's cosmic universe, introducing audiences to new alien worlds, diverse species, and interstellar politics. The first meaningful appearance of Thanos within the movie shows him as a genuine threat, rather than just a post-credits tease. His relationship with Gamora and Nebula provided crucial character development for the future Big Bad.
I'm sorry, little one.
We get the introduction of the Nova Corps, Xandar's peacekeeping force. This shows us the political landscape of the universe and ties into other MCU projects like Nova, which has been stuck in development hell for a few years now. Alright, let me hit you with some behind the scenes trivia. Chris Pratt lost over 60 pounds in 6 months to play Star-Lord. Vin Diesel recorded Groot's iconic line, "I am Groot," over 1,000 times in multiple languages. Okay, maybe he did deserve the paycheck.
You up? Let's do this.
The film features over 2,800 visual effects shots, I'm gonna give Guardians of the Galaxy an A. It completely changed what we thought was possible in the MCU, proving that heart and humour could carry even the most outlandish concept to success. The film's perfect blend of action, comedy, and genuine emotion creates an unforgettable experience that holds up to multiple viewings. I would have given this an S, however it does lack something within the story. And I think that something is the villain, Ronan the Accuser. He just doesn't do it for me. He feels quite standard and lacks some definition. Unlike the villain from Volume 3, who is much more of a richer character. What do you think about Guardians of the Galaxy? Did it deserve to become one of Marvel's biggest surprise hits? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Guardians of the Galaxy represents Marvel at its most creative and daring. It proved that audiences were ready for more than traditional superhero stories, opening the door for more experimental and diverse storytelling within the MCU. The film's success lies in its ability to make us care deeply about a talking raccoon and a tree, while delivering a story that's simultaneously epic in scale and deeply personal. It's a testament to the power of character-driven storytelling, even in the midst of spectacular science fiction. Age of Ultron is okay. That's the title. Because I feel like this movie is good in many ways, but it ultimately lacks something great. I think the main reason for all of this is the high expectations from fans, the structure, and the villain being pretty lame compared to his comic book counterpart. I'm not going to lie, this was my first introduction to the MCU. Yes, I watched a lot of movies growing up, but I never watched anything Marvel except for Spider-Man.
How? Hold on, bro. How?
Well, after I watched this and realized there was an entire connected universe, I was hooked.
It's kind of cut out of the Stark cloth. It's not just this kind of mindless robot. It has personality.
Don't compare me with Stark.
You're gonna break your old man's heart.
Age of Ultron was a very ambitious movie. It introduced a hell of a lot to the universe, which I'll get into later, and delves into the personal lives of each core Avenger. I personally find this movie a joy to watch. There's a fair amount of action and tension, as Ultron, voiced by James Spader, is still quite an antagonizing villain.
The only thing living in this world will be metal.
Even though he doesn't live up to his full potential, the world building is what sold me on this. It introduces so much more lore to the universe. You can tell Joss Whedon wanted to create something amazing, and that was also this film's downfall. Yep, Whedon returned to direct and produce this movie after the massive success of Avengers 2012. Say what you will about him, but he's produced a lot of good stuff, with Firefly, Serenity, Buffy, and Angel being his most prominent. I remember reading that he found working on Age of Ultron a difficulty, especially when it came to the editing. His first cut of the movie was actually 195 minutes long, meaning some scenes had to be cut, scenes that Whedon wanted to keep, leading to a lot of disagreements between him and the Marvel execs. So yeah, it doesn't sound like he had the best of times behind the scenes. Age of Ultron wasn't based on any singular comic, but multiple subplots from different Avengers arcs, such as Ultron's first appearance in Avengers issue 54 and 55, and Ultron's comic event with the exact same title, Age of Ultron. Which is funny because in this movie, it isn't really an Age of Ultron, more like a couple of weeks of Ultron. The way Age of Ultron is structured is a bit messy. There's a lot going on. These are just a few main beats from the movie's plot. The Maximoff twins, Vision's creation, Ultron and his eventual meteor plan, the Avengers and their worst fears, Natasha and Bruce's relationship, and that's not even all of it. It's surprising to me that they even managed to fit all this in, and it still be adequately paced and cohesive enough for us to understand. The final runtime of the movie is 141 minutes, and I've noticed on my many rewatches that it feels so much longer than this, partially because of how it's structured. It's built like an episodic series, with 6 different acts similar to Whedon's early work. See, I like the sound of this structure. It's unique and it feels very comic book inspired, but it does drag. And for a movie, you want a continuous story, not something that stops and starts and stops and starts. If I were to sit here and talk about each character in this movie, I'd be here for a while. So I'm just going to quickly skim over each Avenger in this section. In my research for this movie, I've seen a lot of comments about how this film doesn't develop the characters in any way, but I think this film does a good job in letting us stop for a second and get to know these characters on a deeper level. The use of Wanda Maximoff's powers here let us see their darkest memories and fears. Tony's being failing to do enough and losing the people he loves due to his actions, which correlates with his mishap at creating Ultron, as the reason Ultron was built in the first place is because Tony wanted a suit of armor around the world.
I see a suit of armor around the world.
Cap's was the fact that he's nothing without war. All he believes is he's a weapon, and that he can't really live a normal life. He sums this up perfectly at the end of the movie.
Guy who wanted all that went in the ice 75 years ago.
Thor's seems like he's meeting everyone in Valhalla, and he's the reason they're there, which forces him to go off onto his own adventures, leading to Ragnarok and Infinity War.
The Mind Stone is the 4th of the Infinity Stones to show up in the last few years. It's not a coincidence.
For Natasha, it was her time in the Red Room, and the torture she faced. Other than that, we don't really get much development of her character, except for maybe the relationship with Bruce.
Hey, big guy. Sun's getting real low.
So with Banner, we don't actually see what he sees, but my guess is the Hulk just going berserk and killing everyone. This obviously leads to the showdown between Hulk and Tony in his Hulkbuster suit, which is one of my all-time favorite action scenes in the MCU.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep.
I'll get more into that soon. Lastly, Hawkeye manages to avoid getting brainwashed again, but we do get some insight into his life outside of the Avengers, as we meet his wife and children at his farmhouse. But that shows us that he sacrifices this life every time he goes out on a mission, finally adding some definition to a character that's been with us for a little while by this point. Ultron is a toughie. He's really menacing, mostly due to the incredible voice acting from James Spader.
You rise, only to fall.
But also because of his motives. He wants peace, but to do that, humanity has to be wiped from the earth. Like I said earlier, he isn't exactly like his comic book character here, as he has a lot more emotion, but that could be due to him being created by Tony and Bruce instead of Hank Pym as it is in the comic. He's not a bad villain though. Ultron is up there for me. However, to have him as just a one-off villain in a singular Avengers movie is kind of a waste. Who knows, he could be out there somewhere waiting to be the ultimate villain of a later MCU saga. With Ultron constantly evolving himself, He creates a vessel made out of vibranium that he calls his vision.
My vision. They really did take everything from me.
Which the Avengers later steal, and Thor then helps Tony download Jarvis into, not before a quick foreboding of civil war. Our introduction to Vision is quite creative. It really works here, and I don't think there's any other way of incorporating him into the universe than this, although this movie is already bloated enough, so to add this can feel a bit forced, but I like it. So with Vision being an additional character, we also get the Maximoff twins. Again, I like their inclusion. Their connection to Sokovia and their feud with Stark being the main reason they join Ultron until they see how insane he actually is. Wanda being one of the most important characters to enter the MCU, even having her own show after Vision's death in Infinity War. And then totally flipping, becoming the main villain of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, with her whereabouts still unknown. It's a different story with Pietro. He obviously dies in this movie, but I think we needed this, or else it would have felt as though there were no stakes at all. Aaron Taylor Johnson is great as Quicksilver. He has great chemistry with Hawkeye, and the fact that he dies saving Clint and the kid makes his death just as impactful. The set pieces and visuals are bigger and better this time around. I just realized I haven't even mentioned the opening sequence yet. It's great, right? How it's set in the snowy mountains and the fact that we just get dropped into this battle. That group shot we get is incredible. Another noteworthy sequence is the Hulkbuster scene, as it's one of the most complex sequences to animate, taking months of work to complete. The Hulkbuster itself looks incredible. The way it assembles is very smart, as it comes down from a satellite in space. Each part comes to him separately, similar to what they did in Iron Man 3. It builds up the tension, and when he finally equips it all, it's just perfection. Most of the character designs are looking good. We get a new shield magnet thing with Cap, and his suit retains the same realism from the Winter Soldier. Iron Man's suit looks extra fresh and slimmer this time around. Thor keeps the same costume, but they do get rid of that scaly arm armor. Finally, I just want to talk about Ultron. He genuinely looks fantastic. I love the detailing and the way he evolves himself, so you can clearly see the advancements he's made to himself. Although, if I were to make any kind of adjustment, it would be his face. It's very human-like. If they used a design similar to the Ultron in Marvel Rivals, something like this, then they'd have been cooking. Quick trivia time. Kevin Feige confirmed that Spader was the only actor Marvel spoke with for the role of Ultron. Spader also used motion capture. The farm scenes were kept so secret during filming that they weren't included in the script. Joss Whedon originally planned to include both Spider-Man and Captain Marvel in the film, but neither could be included due to various rights issues at the time. The Hulkbuster scene was actually the first sequence that was completed for the film, as it required the most time for visual effects work. Linda Cardellini's role as Laura Barton, Hawkeye's wife, was kept completely secret until the film's release. Her name wasn't even included in any of the promotional materials. To the rating, I've switched it around a bit from last time. I'd place this film in the B tier. It does a lot right and expands the lore of the universe, creating plot points for Marvel to circle back round to. Although Age of Ultron doesn't quite capture the magic of Avengers 2012, its structure, along with its complex character additions, makes it difficult for the average moviegoer to understand. I do have a soft spot for this film, but I can also see where people come from when they say it's their least favourite movie within the MCU. For me, it will always be remembered as a core reason for my love of the Marvel Universe. Ant-Man was an incredible addition to the MCU. Paul Rudd brings so much charisma to the character of Scott Lang, and the amazing visuals make the whole shrinking effect look insanely cool. It's a big gamble bringing a character that has these powers into the universe. I can only imagine how much thought went behind the visuals for this film. And wouldn't you know, it works. With Ant-Man now a core member of the Avengers, and being a pivotal player in later movies like Endgame, it goes to show that even the most simplistic character, if treated right, can affect the universe in a massive way.
Ant-Man actually is one of the most dangerous Avengers.
An incredibly powerful character.
I can shrink, and that's actually really, really cool.
The road to getting Ant-Man to the big screen was quite messy. Originally, Ant-Man was planned for Phase 1 of the Marvel Universe, set to be one of the core Avengers in 2012. However, the process was tricky. The intended director was Edgar Wright, an incredible guy who's created lots of films I've really enjoyed, such as the Cornetto trilogy,
Have a nice cold pint and wait for all this to blow over.
and Baby Driver. But there were a lot of creative differences, mostly due to Marvel wanting to integrate the film into the larger universe. Edgar and co-writer Joe Cornish had a complete script before leaving, and most of that still went into the final film. Peyton Reed eventually took over the project, and the production went smoothly from then on. There's plenty of iterations of Ant-Man in the comics, from Hank Pym himself to Eric O'Grady, but in this film we get Scott Lang. This was the plan from the beginning, as Edgar Wright was actually the one who cast Paul Rudd as Scott Lang back when he was head of the project. For Paul Rudd, it was quite a shock, as he thought that he wasn't the type of actor they would offer any of their parts to. But in my opinion, he nails it. Paul Rudd is quite a nuanced guy, managing to go from this happy-go-lucky demeanour to a serious and more darker performance. So it really fits the character of Scott Lang, as he's this resourceful criminal that's also very witty and humorous.
What, you haven't heard of me? No, you wouldn't have heard of me.
Even if the Ant-Man we get isn't Hank Pym, he still exists in the MCU, as the creator of the Pym particle and the Ant-Man suit. We do find out that Hank Pym in his early days was actually the original Ant-Man, alongside his wife Janet Van Dyne as the Wasp. I would have loved to see a Disney Plus series revolving around Hank Pym's time as Ant-Man, and the missions he would go on in the early days of S.H.I.E.L.D. It would just be fascinating, don't you think? Well, Michael Douglas is the one to portray Hank Pym, and his performance is just as fascinating. You can see the pain in losing his wife and how he's closed himself off from not only being a superhero, but from his daughter too, leaving some unresolved issues.
I lost your mother. I didn't mean to lose you too.
Hope Van Dyne is a nice addition. I feel like she grounds the movie with her less enthusiastic role. She's definitely not as happy-go-lucky as Scott, that's for sure, but I'd say that's due to her losing her mum and pretty much her dad at the same time, as he shut himself off from the outside world to focus on the quantum realm and bringing Janet back. Closer to the end of the movie, however, Hank includes Hope in his work and even lets her take the mantle of the Wasp, something that he's been holding back on in fear of losing her too. This makes her character just as important as Lang, and brings these two major comic book characters to life.
It's about damn time.
Now, for the villain of the movie, we get Yellow Jacket. Once a protege of Hank Pym, Darren Cross later becomes the CEO of Pym Technologies, even rebranding it to Cross Technologies. He becomes obsessed trying to recreate the Pym particle, and even creates his own suit called the Yellow Jacket. He does try to sell this to some evil organizations, but eventually equips it himself. He's a really cool looking villain. Yes, it does follow the villain having the exact same powers of the protagonist trope, a cliche that Marvel was really popular for, but it makes sense and follows the simplistic style of this movie. Corey Stoll plays the evil mentor role perfectly, showing how bitter and egotistical his character is, later returning to play MODOK in Ant-Man Quantumania. Like I mentioned earlier, the visuals are fantastic, and it's not just the shrinking effect I'm on about, it's the colour palette. It really comes into its own here, and this is what I mean when I say this movie set the style of Phase 3. It's bright, but it's still grounded in reality, creating this perfect balance. Okay, so with the shrinking visuals, the first time we see it is in the bathtub. Seeing this on the big screen is incredible. It's just really immersive. It feels like you're shrinking too. They did this by using a combination of macro photography, motion capture, and CGI. The costumes we see here aren't as ugly and cartoonish as I'd have imagined them being. They fit in really well with the tone of the universe. Ant-Man has this motorbike suit look to it, with most of the design centered in the helmet. I don't really know how to describe it, to be honest. It's a lot chunkier than its predecessors, but that's mostly because it's only a prototype, so it's quite analog in places. Yellow Jacket's suit is far more complex, made more for military combat with these pincer type things on his back as weapons. There's also this honeycomb design on it that just fits this whole theme. So yeah, all in all, I'd say this film did a really good job with its visuals. So we're at the Easter egg segment now, and there's a lot of MCU connections here. During the heist scene, one of the organizations that tries to buy the Pym particle has a 10 rings tattoo visible. The sequence where Scott attempts to break into the new Avengers facility features Falcon, directly tying the film to Age of Ultron's ending and establishing the new compound. The flashback sequence features a young Howard Stark and Peggy Carter, maintaining continuity with the other MCU films and showing Hank Pym's history with S.H.I.E.L.D. The film introduces the quantum realm, which becomes crucial to the entire MCU, especially in Avengers Endgame. Mitchell Carson, who we also see in that flashback, is revealed to be a former Hydra agent, connecting to Captain America the Winter Soldier's revelation about Hydra's infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D. While we're at it, we may as well look at the trivia for this movie. Paul Rudd underwent a strict year-long training regimen to get in shape for the role, completely transforming his physique. Despite being considered a smaller Marvel film, Ant-Man grossed over $500 million worldwide. Michael Pena improvised many of his scenes with Paul Rudd, leading to the unique storytelling style of his character's flashback sequences. The Baskin-Robbins scene was inspired by Paul Rudd's real-life experience working at an ice cream shop before his acting career. The film's iconic toy train fight scene between Ant-Man and Yellowjacket took over 2 months to execute. Ant-Man feels like a new take on a superhero story. It could be because of its unique style, fun concepts, or even its relatable characters, but if you look outside of the box, it's a very simple movie using a very simple template that feels like a breath of fresh air, especially after watching Age of Ultron. So I'm going to give this movie an A. This was the first solo Marvel movie I watched in the cinemas, and I felt like it drew me into this universe just as much as Age of Ultron did. But if we're talking about the film on its own, then it still surprised me in its own fun, quirky way. If you've made it this far, I just want to congratulate you. You're a legend. Like I've said in the previous reviews, during Phase 2 is where I discovered the MCU, and where I'm guessing a lot of other people my age found their love for it too, although I think I was quite late to the game. All in all, Phase 2 is what made the MCU what it is today. They found their footing here, and it shows, especially in the way they visualize their shots and the themes they experiment on. Phase 2 also came across a bit strange to me. Not as strange as Phase 4, my god no. But Phase 2 just ends quite suddenly with Ant-Man, leaving no real conclusion to the phase, unlike Phase 1 with Avengers and Phase 3 with Avengers Endgame.
I don't even know who you are.
Civil War would have been an amazing capping off point to the phase, disassembling the Avengers before the arrival of Thanos in Phase 3.
The hardest choices require the strongest wills.
I mean, you can look at these phases in any way you like, but for storytelling purposes, this would have been incredible. I guess if you don't look too deeply into it, you could say the theme of Phase 2 is expansion. Expanding storylines, expanding characters, and importantly, expanding the universe.